twists.
I didn't really want to die, you know. I didn't really want to like end it all. I wanted there to be someone to be there, to be able to knock on the door and pick me up and check if I was okay. I mean, my ego was so up that I thought I could choose the time to die, you know.
For several decades, Depeche Mode has been one of the cornerstones of electronic music, captivating audiences worldwide with their dark, brooding sound and enigmatic frontman, Dave Gahan. Fans have speculated much about how deep the well of inspiration behind such classic songs ran. Now, in a stunning admission, Gahan finally speaks on the darkness that truly fueled his music all along. Let's look at the life and career of this music legend before we get to some jaw-dropping confessions that shocked the music world. Early life of Dave Gahan. Dave Gahan was born David Calcott on the 9th of May 1962 in Chigwell, Essex, England. He is far better remembered for his role as frontman of one of the most pivotal electronic bands to this day. His early life was marked by immense familial changes and personal challenges that definitely set the pace for his later career. Gahan's family life had its own twists since the very beginning. Leonard William Calcott, his biological father, deserted the family when Dave was barely 2 years old. His mother, Sylvia Ruth, brought him and his elder sister up, Susan, on her own. She later married Jack Gahan, by whose surname Dave would come to be known. The family relocated to Basildon in Essex, where Dave grew up with his two half-younger brothers, Peter and Philip. Gahan's relationship with his biological father was challenging, and discovering more about his father during his childhood was a difficult experience for him. His relationship with his stepfather, Jack, was affected when Jack passed away during his childhood. Leonard's temporary reprieve and disappearance put Gahan in a state of abandonment and disorientation regarding his real identity. Dave's childhood years were really turbulent. He described himself as a wild child, getting into much trouble at school, and on several occasions he was suspended for a host of misbehaviors that included theft and vandalism. He came before the juvenile court 3 times during his teenage years, primarily for offenses that included joyriding, graffiti, criminal damage, and theft. At 16, Gahan dropped out of school because he felt out of place and very disillusioned with the school system. He held different jobs here and there, but his criminal record didn't make getting a decent job. Despite all this, Gahan found a creative outlet through studying art and fashion at Southend Art College. This was the time of punk culture in the late 1970s, which formed most of his artistic inclinations. The ambiance of the college was lively, with students creating clothes and going to concerts. This was where he found his niche in developing as a musician and performer during those times. Gahan's entry into music. Gahan's foray into the world of music kick-started in the late 1970s when he became part of Depeche Mode. Shortly after this group was put together in 1980. Depeche Mode is a legendary English electronic band that was formed in 1980, and it has made its mark on the industry ever since then. Based in Basildon, Essex, the band is known for its innovative sounds, fusing synth pop, new wave, and alternative rock. Depeche Mode emerged in 1980 as Dave Gahan. Depeche Mode emerged in 1980 as Dave Gahan, born David Calcott, May 9, 1962, lead vocals; Martin Gore, born July 23, 1961, keyboards, guitar, chief songwriter; Andrew Fletcher, born July 8, 1961, keyboards; and Vince Clarke, keyboards, primary songwriter. The name of the group was taken from a French fashion magazine and literally means fashion update or fashion news dispatch. Their 1981 debut album, Speak and Spell, offered a disinhibited look at synth pop. The LP was much lighter in tone than most of their later, much darker work. It was the only album to include Vince Clarke, who left to form Yazoo and then Erasure. The album Speak and Spell created a good impression in the music world. It hit number 10 on the UK albums chart and appeared in all-time top 1,000 albums in 2000. Many consider this album responsible for bringing the so-called synth pop into the forefront in the early 1980s. It has variously been described as a conservative, functional pop record and a groundbreaking release. This nexus between both accounts precisely identifies its influence on the sound of electronic music at that time. The single that really marked the album out for something special was Just Can't Get Enough, which itself became a real watermark for Depeche Mode, and one of the true classics of the genre. This record, released half a year after the album's release, simply proved once more how well this band could make some real catchiness and dancing tracks that get through to people. This single placed Depeche Mode in popular culture with its infectious melody and upbeat lyrics, which is still played in clubs and on the radio to this day. Critical reception for Speak and Spell upon release was largely positive. Publications such as Record Mirror lavished the LP with praise for its smart simplicity, describing it as a charming, cheeky collection of compulsive dance tunes. Critics immediately latched on to the effective use of synthesizers along with catchy melodies, the very trademarks of synth pop. Not all reviews were positive, however. The Village Voice's Robert Christgau dismissed much of the album as tuneful pap that was bereft of depth. In retrospective reviews, the record has been singled out for its retro appeal and its contribution to the development of electronic music. Pitchfork zeroed in on its staying power and noted how the early sound of the band was remarkably placed in 1980s pop due to its earnestness. Everything changed when Clark left. Now, with Gore as the primary songwriter, the band released their second album, A Broken Frame, in 1982, which became a lead-in to much darker and more complex themes. Their second studio album, released on September 27, 1982, was titled A Broken Frame. Produced by the band and Daniel Miller, the work was recorded at Blackwing Studios in London from December 1981 to July 1982. The three key tracks on the album are probably the three singles, See You, The Meaning of Love, and Leave in Silence. It did a great job on the UK charts, reaching number 8, and cemented the status of Depeche Mode as one of the leading lights of the developing early 1980s synth pop scene. A Broken Frame provided the basis for the See You and A Broken Frame tours from 1982 to 1983. Since then, the album has been issued and remastered several times. However, many fans consider that original vinyl mixes from 1982 represent the definitive version of the record. The turning point can be considered the fourth studio album of the band, Some Great Reward. Released on September 24, 1984, it carried a much more mature sound and complex themes, hence being greatly popular. Some Great Reward reached number 5 on the UK albums chart and 51 on the Billboard 200 in the US. It did very well in Germany, actually reaching number 1 there. Some of its famous singles included People Are People, their first major US hit, which went up to number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. Others were Master and Servant and Blasphemous Rumors, a double A-side with Somebody. The commercial success is epitomized by the certifications, which include platinum in the United States for sales of more than 1 million copies, gold in Germany for 250,000 copies sold, and silver in the UK for 60,000 copies. Some Great Reward is tinged with personal and social themes, such as sexual politics in Master and Servant, or existential reflections within Blasphemous Rumors. The sound developed from the previous records. Much more use of samplers and more prominent synthesizers set the stage for later sonic experiments. Upon its release, Some Great Reward met praise for the inventiveness of its sound and the profundity of its lyrics. More often than not, it was actually a progression in Depeche Mode's artistic journey toward the darker and more complex things. The album was supported by the Some Great Reward tour, which was the band's longest at that time. One concert from the tour was recorded and released as the video entitled The World We Live In and Live in Hamburg. In retrospect, Some Great Reward is frequently cited as one of Depeche Mode's essential albums that had a great influence on a lot of artists of electronic and pop music. Indeed, such a mix of catchy melodies with important lyrics and thoughts really cemented its place as a synth-pop pioneer. Their fifth studio album, Black Celebration, released on the 17th of March 1986, was even more serious and further departed from their pure synth-pop sound. It became more dark and atmospheric. Black Celebration reached number 4 on the UK albums chart and is very frequently cited as one of the most influential records from the 1980s. In 1989, Spin magazine ranked it number 15 on their 25 greatest albums of all time list. With hit singles Strip, A Question of Lust, and A Question of Time, this was the cementing of Depeche Mode's signature sound. The album was produced by Daniel Miller and Gareth Jones, who attempted to reflect the atmosphere of an immersive tech-noir future dystopia. Martin Gore, lyricist, explores much darker subjects for this album, although there are moments of hope, maybe even romance. Singles released to support the album included Strip, A Question of Lust, and A Question of Time. An extensive tour supporting the album was the Black Celebration Tour in Europe, North America, and Japan. Black Celebration is a turning point within everything in the discography of Depeche Mode, communicating their leap in being some of the most mature-sounding yet experimentally alternative electronic music makers around. It was a blueprint for the many artists that came after. Released on September 28, 1987, Music for the Masses was a breakthrough album for Depeche Mode, which positioned them as growing giants of electronic music. It charted at number 10 on the UK albums chart and gold in the United States, signaling further their newfound popularity from the huge Rose Bowl performance on the Music for the Masses tour, which fundamentally rearranged their US following. This record is very often cited as one of the best works by Depeche Mode, drawing acclaimed reviews and having been included in the digest 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. It gets a mention for its rich, multi-layered sound that explores themes of sex, drugs, isolation, and obsession. Music for the Masses produced several great singles. The first single, Strange Love, was commercially successful due to its infectious melody and lyrics that touched on BDSM themes. Never Let Me Down Again might better be known for its anthemic nature, which is one of the staple songs played live. Quite long, with a very overwhelming chorus and ever-pounding beat. Other singles included Behind the Wheel and Little 15, carrying the darker and more complex tones found on the album. Behind the Wheel, with its nearly hypnotic rhythm. Most critics gave Music for the Masses a generally warm reception at the time of its release. Robert Christgau responded positively to the lyrical depth and how the band could apparently execute such complex subjects effortlessly into some fine tunes. NME's Jane Solanas was impressed by how the album, particularly Never Let Me Down Again, created such a masterpiece combining homoeroticism and drug euphoria. Others, however, felt that its mature aesthetic had been toned down rather compared to previous works. In retrospective reviews, the album continued to be acknowledged by critics as important. Q magazine called it a turning point where Depeche Mode became viewed as a serious artist. In Slant magazine, it has been termed a refinement executed perfectly in probing the dark zones of post-punk synthpop. Music for the Masses is often cited as an elevation for Depeche Mode in both artistry and general appeal, maybe due in part to the growing influence of Alan Wilder within the band. The combination of electronic sounds with those of rock, with the subjects it tackled, made the record very famous and established Depeche Mode as a huge figure within music. Its influence can be heard in a wide variety of genres by many artists, and to this day, it stays near to the hearts of Depeche Mode's discography. Violator was a breakthrough record for Depeche Mode that established the band as an electronic music superstar. Its success projected the band before a larger audience, enough to push the 1993 follow-up, Songs of Faith and Devotion, to number 1 in both the US and UK charts. The album singles like Personal Jesus, Enjoy the Silence, and Policy of Truth did very well also, with Personal Jesus breaking into the top 30 of the Billboard Hot 100. Enjoy the Silence did much better, reaching number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. Violator garnered positive critical reception, where reviewers praised its dark atmospheric sound and that Depeche Mode was evolving beyond just their band status. Paul Lester of Melody Maker reviewed it as Depeche Mode's most arresting work to date. The album has been noted in several lists of greatest albums ever made, such as Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time, where it placed number 342 in 2003 and 2012, and number 167 in 2020. It also appears in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Violator was a huge commercial success, peaking at number 7 on the Billboard 200 album chart, the first Depeche Mode album to achieve 1 million in sales in the United States. To support the album, the band held a signing at Warehouse Entertainment in Los Angeles, which drew a crowd estimated at 17,000 and forced the police to shut down the event. Violator is nearly unilaterally hailed as Depeche Mode's greatest work and universally esteemed as one of the high watermarks in all of pop, rock, and electronic music. The influence of Depeche Mode's Violator has left a long shadow, with alt-metal bands right through to the extremely far-fetched acts like Susan Boyle taking notes from the record. The dark, atmospheric textures of the album and somewhat mysterious lyrics have made the songs from Violator quite easy for many different acts to cover. These include Johnny Cash's well-received acoustic rendition of Personal Jesus, a personal favorite of its songwriter Martin Gore. Violator became a landmark for Depeche Mode. This was the instant when the lineup worked in perfect unison before the subsequent reshuffles within the group. Because it was so close to fans and critics, the result still remains relevant to this very day. Playing the Angel was the record that really brought Depeche Mode back into the public frame of reference after a 4-year gap. It reached number 1 in more than 10 countries and made both the UK and US top 10. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the album is that it marks the first time lead vocalist Dave Gahan had written for a Depeche Mode record, scripting the lyrics for 3 of the songs. This added to the songwriting mix that led to the raw, gritty feel of the album. Playing the Angel was supported by 4 singles: Precious, A Pain That I'm Used To, Suffer Well, and John the Revelator or Lillian. Playing the Angel received mostly positive reviews upon release. Gillian Telling of Entertainment Weekly praised the album's raw, gritty sound when compared to its predecessors. The album was also listed in the 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die book, which deems it as an essential piece of work within Depeche Mode's discography. AllMusic's Andy Kellman, writing in a review years later, dubbed it one of Depeche Mode's most consistent albums of the 2000s, and praised that it's where the band managed to sound modern without trends to follow. 2005's Playing the Angel found Depeche Mode furthering their refinement of sound. Lyrically, this release dealt with themes of faith, sin, and suffering, and was an exploration of a kind of introspection. Thanks in no small part to the extremely demanding Touring the Angel tour, the status of Depeche Mode as an internationally respected electronic music force was now firmly established. Showing skillful regard for both innovation and tradition, Playing the Angel was a masterclass at staying contemporary without selling out their heritage. The influence would prove incalculable, palpably upon hundreds of artists who came after them. Released the following year, 2009, under the title Sounds of the Universe, it was another album that made Depeche Mode's discography a very big step, showing a band with much evolution but still leaving its flavor in each song. That album did very well, though, for the band. It went up to number 2 in the UK and 3 in the US. At the time of its release, Sounds of the Universe received mostly favorable reviews, with many critics hailing the record for sonic experimentation and access to the pop audience. The record established Depeche Mode as one of the true innovators of the genre, mixing electronic sounds with a pop sensibility. Some thought it didn't contain the same emotional depth as its predecessors, but the album's commercial success and the long-lasting popularity of the record helped to prove its grandeur. Many think Sounds of the Universe is a real milestone for Depeche Mode, showing their part in the moving sounds of music while remaining utterly themselves. The tested ground of themes like introspection and existentialism worked well for the record, and fans responded to the lyrical use of deep, meaningful lyrics, cementing another milestone in Depeche Mode's legacy. On Spirit, released in 2017, Depeche Mode returned to discussions concerning social and political concerns. This record marked their return to a more political sound, attesting to the engagement of the band with contemporary challenges. Spirit was also commercially successful, reaching number 5 on the Billboard 200 chart and gaining top 10 status in several other countries. The lead single from Spirit, Where's the Revolution, was praised for its catchiness and biting social commentary. Receiving critical acclaim, the album rode a wave of the enormous global Spirit tour that had solidified Depeche Mode's stature as one of the world's bigger live arena acts. While they praised Spirit's touching on political issues, by and large, critics still applauded the band for not missing its sweet spot. In fact, some felt it was a bit too on the nose, with Pitchfork calling out on a combination of radical shift in tenor and gut-punch timing that's tough to brush up against in the current moment that has been rolling in its review. Although the reviews were not very positive, Spirit proved that Depeche Mode still had some surprises in store. Thematically centered on themes of social discontent and existential questioning, the record appealed to devotees of the band and critics alike, forever capturing them as one of the most thoughtful, socially aware bands of their time. Spirit remains a real milestone in their discography, one that would seal the moment of its evolution without selling out to commercialism. The solo effort from Dave Gahan, however, was a little more delayed. Paper Monsters came out in 2003. Being a Mute Records release in the UK and a Reprise Records release in North America, the album charted at a rather unimpressive number 36 in the UK Albums Chart. Having had top 10 success in Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland, it did very little to dent the consciousness of North Americans. The biggest hit from the album was the first single, Dirty Sticky Floors, featuring an unprecedented appearance on Depeche Mode-related music video commercials on MTV. It became Gahan's most successful solo track, peaking at number 18 in the UK singles chart as well as in the top 10 in Germany and Italy. While not achieving commercial success on the continent, its remixes by Junkie XL debuted at number 5 on the Billboard Hot Dance Music or Club Play chart as well. Paper Monsters received generally positive reviews, scoring 67 on Metacritic. Q Magazine described it as much better than most of the recent output by Depeche Mode and Martin Gore, as it was personally lyrical. The surprising depth of the album, and Gahan's range of vocals, BBC Music. Pitchfork was much less positive about the album's focus on personal life and Gahan's lyrical themes. Blending rock, electronic, and down-tempo elements, Paper Monsters reflected Gahan's Depeche Mode experiences. Its deeply personal songs chronicled his struggles with addiction, relationships, and redemption. Produced by Ken Thomas, Sigur Rós, and co-written with Knox Chandler, Psychedelic Furs, the album showcased Gahan's songwriting maturity. Although it didn't reach Depeche Mode's commercial peak, critical acclaim cemented Paper Monsters as a defining turn in Gahan's solo career. Depeche Mode has undoubtedly left its mark on music. With over 100 million records sold worldwide, 54 chart hits in the UK alone, and 17 top 10 albums to their credit, they rank among the best-selling music artists in the world. This type of innovative technology in creating emotionally resonant music founded a global fan base with a critically acclaimed career, which has realized induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Gahan's struggle with cancer. However, the group had to go through one awful test when in 2009, their lead vocalist Dave Gahan was diagnosed with a low-grade malignant tumor on his bladder. The finding was a surprise since it was right after his admission for gastroenteritis. Fortunately, the tumor did not attach itself to the wall of the bladder and was extracted through operation. Gahan shared about his case, describing the disbelieving moment and fear that resulted for his family. After his successful surgery, Gahan returned to performing, though the band postponed several shows to ensure complete recovery. Such a health crisis became an important point in Gahan's life and career, testifying to how he had risen above all sorts of problems and odds to continue with his music in Depeche Mode. Gahan's struggle with addiction. Beyond health problems, Dave Gahan's life was even plagued by a very stormy relationship with addiction to particularly heroin. It all began in adolescence, driven by a troublesome childhood and seeking an escape. By the end of his teen years, he had become addicted to heroin, which grew worse as his popularity soared throughout the 1980s. The early 1990s were an especially dark time, culminating in a suicide attempt the following year. The drastic action was a desperate cry for help after indulging in a drug-induced paranoia and isolation spiral. Gahan was living a life riddled with fear and instability at the time. Apart from these psychological mental health issues, Gahan's substance abuse was also severely compromising his physical health. During an October 1993 performance in New Orleans, he succumbed to a minor drug-induced heart attack, and he was forced to leave the stage in the middle of the performance. Although the attack was described as minor, it was a highly salient warning of the perilous path Gahan was on. By the turn of 1990, Gahan had survived 4 near-fatal incidents and picked up the dark nickname of the Cat from local paramedics. His health was significantly impacted by his addiction, and the heart attack was a critical moment in his struggle with substance abuse. Their career was indicative of the Depeche Mode that survived against all odds. The final test of their strength came when their lead vocalist, Dave Gahan, developed a serious health problem, making it impossible for him to tour for some time. These experiences were harrowing and served to underline the dangerous nature of Gahan's addiction and how it had come very close to destroying his life and career. One particularly hair-raising incident occurred in May 1996 when Gahan took a near-fatal overdose. His heart had stopped beating for some couple of terrifying minutes, the final wake-up call he needed. It was a slip into unconsciousness and deep darkness that threw him headfirst into his destructive ways. This harrowing experience was a catalyst for change. Gahan eventually received professional help and began his uphill struggle with being clean. By 2011, he reached the milestone of celebrating his first year clean and sober. The public war against addiction and mental health is one that has been carried on very visibly throughout his life story, leaving an impressible stain on his personal and professional trajectory. He has been through experiences that infuse raw emotion and profound depths into his songwriting, which raises Depeche Mode's music to new artistic heights. In the process of going through this all, Gahan emerged as a real symbol of resilience, performing and creating while using his platform to raise awareness about the challenges of addiction and mental health. Gahan, personal life. Beyond the public persona, Dave Gahan has found a proper foundation for his life in Jennifer Gahan. Their paths crossed during a real recovery period. As a result of this, birthed a bond that has survived more than 2 decades. Truly an achievement in the often tumultuous world of entertainment. Jennifer is an accomplished actress, writer, and producer who built her successful career. Her artistic ventures no doubt added much fulfillment to her life, while her no-nonsense perspective offered a balance to the pressured world of music. Much as Dave is internationally famous, Jennifer's taste for other artists, such as Billie Holiday, indicates a deep appreciation that goes beyond the superficial charm of glamour. Her strong support has helped Dave get through many hurdles, some health-related, for example, when he had a serious health scare in 2009. All this was sustained by the love and sustaining partnership that stayed long with both of them. Together, they reared a family with their children, James Rogers Gahan and Stella Rose Gahan. What the world knows as Dave, of course, charismatic frontman for Depeche Mode, Jennifer knows as David. An intimate view of a private man playing a rock star for the world. Death of Fletcher. The band faced its tragedy in 2022 with the untimely death of one of its founding members, Andy Fletcher. The band and fans were in a somber mood. Fletcher's participation went beyond just being an instrumental player. To many, he offered balance and was a person of confidence. His passing must have left a gap in the band's operations. Against all odds, Depeche Mode and Dave Gahan continued to produce music, and their work spoke deeply about their own resiliency and fighting spirit. Death left the band in utter dismay, having lost Andy Fletcher suddenly. The vacuum created in Gahan and Martin Gore's hearts by the loss of their best friend and buddy was beyond compare. They held a private memorial for Fletcher in which they shared laughter and tears alongside fond memories of his memory. The assemblage reflects accordingly the depth of their association, a relationship of decades paved through musical exploration and shared life experiences. The emotional turmoil that followed Fletcher's death did not spare the creative way of the band either. In the next album, Memento Mori, the band made this the continuing theme of life, death, and mortality. Gahan poured naked emotions into the music as he not only lost a close friend, but also cited the futility of life. It became a cathartic process for him to write the album, in that he channeled his grief into artistic renditions. This absence created a void in Gahan's understanding of the band's dynamics. Music was his way of finding solace and honoring Fletcher's memory. In its turn, the record became something of a mutually cooperative journey into the unknown, a testament to the bonds of friendship and the resilience of the human spirit. With Memento Mori, Depeche Mode managed to turn this sense of sorrow into an extremely powerful and relevant artistic declaration. An album, so tender testament to life's fragility held in gentle hands, one of remembering not to waste away the day. Devoting the project to the memory of Fletcher, and in support of the Teenage Cancer Trust, the band has gone on inspiring and lifting its audience in honor of the band's friend, who has since passed away. What is your take on Gahan's clean sheets claims from alcohol addiction? Do you feel he may fall into a relapse if life challenges hit him very hard all over again? Tell us in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more about music legends,